Welcome to Two Humans Talking, the podcast that discusses the challenges of staying healthy in today's modern, fast-paced world. I'm Tiffany Sims, your burnout recovery expert and holistic wellness coach, and today I am here with Erin, and I am so excited. Her and I have just been chatting it up behind the scenes before we hit record, and if you are on YouTube, you can see that she has medals in the background, which means that she is becoming a runner, and you guys know that I love everything Run Disney, and we were talking about that too, so I already love her. I know you're gonna love her. Erin, do you mind sharing a little bit about like who you are, where you live, something that like the audience will be like, "Oh, I'm just like her. I like her already." Like, who are you?
Well, I'm a chef, but I actually didn't start working in the restaurant industry until I was in my mid 30s. I'm 43 now. I live in South Carolina in the Midlands area, just outside of Columbia. I was raised in Myrtle Beach, different setting than what it is
A different
here.
vibe?
Yeah. But so anyway, I've lived here for 20 years now, and like I said, I worked in the restaurant industry and I was diagnosed with three different digestive disorders on top of an autoimmune disease while working as a pastry chef. So you can
Mm-hmm.
imagine having to cut out gluten, how fun that was at the time. But one thing about me, I have a very warped sense of humor. And, some people can handle it and some people, they're like, okay, she's a little odd, but just as goofy and nutty as you might appreciate.
I love it. I love it. I love people who come with disclaimers. I come with a disclaimer like when I meet you, especially if I like connect with you and you don't give me like the X factor. I'm like, sorry, I'm a hugger. Like I come with that disclaimer that I'm gonna hug you when I say hello or goodbye. And so I love that you're like, I have a little bit of a warped sense of humor. You may or may not appreciate it, but it's me and we can have a good time. I love it. I mean, check out her shirt. It says that's what
She
by
said.
she. She said. I love it so much. I always love asking our guests, like, what does healthy mean to you? And is that different than maybe what you thought healthy meant 10, 20 years ago?
Oh, absolutely. I think it's healthy is different for each person. I mean, like I was saying before, bio individuality, everyone is so different. So, what is healthy for one person might not be healthy for another person. And, I think a lot of times people end up comparing themselves to other people saying, well, she did this and that worked for her. So, that's got to work for me. And that's not the case in so many instances. And, that's just one thing that I try to tell people. And they say, well, what do you do? And I'm like, well, here's what I do, but what works for you might be different than what works for me.
Yes. How did you learn that lesson?
Oh, trial and error.
Like, let's go there. Let's do it. Like, let's go there. Because that's the
Sure.
real stuff, right? That's the
Oh
stuff we
yeah.
don't talk about.
Yeah. So I was a bit of an overeater my whole life. Just carbaholic to the max. I mean, there's so many times that people say, "Oh, I was a carbaholic." I mean, no, I could not live without carbs and sugar, and it was like bagels and Captain Crunch and waffles and pancakes. It was like that was my standard breakfast. Whenever I'd be in high school, I'd get pizza and hamburgers and get two things of fries. And whenever I was done, I'm like picking food off my friends' plates, so they knew they're like, all right, we got to finish eating before she does because she's going to come after our food too.
We're like the same person.
So, I mean, it's been such a roller coaster. And my weight, I was thin growing up, but then once I got into my 20s, the pounds started piling on when I turned 21. Hmm, can't possibly imagine if it was all those extra calories I was consuming.
All those drinky drinks.
Yes, all those drinky drinks. And, I grew up in Myrtle Beach, so that's,
If you're like me, drinky drinks aren't just drinky drinks, they're drinky drinks and all the snacks and meals.
yes, yes. And that, oh my gosh, that was a problem. Because, I mean, it would be 2, 3 o'clock in the morning and we're done, dancing. it's like, oh, let's go to the Waffle House. Let's go to the Plantation Pancake House, and I get a grilled cheese and French fries and, just do it all over again the very next day. And that stuff just started adding up. And I had chronic sinus infections in my 20s. And it was like 4 to 6 times a year, I would get on antibiotics because if I got sick, I'm like, oh, I got a sinus infection. I got to take antibiotics again. I had no idea what I was doing to my system at that time. And it was just like this slow process that just kept building and building and building. And I had my daughter when I was 30. And that was when I had gotten up to my heaviest. I was 50 pounds heavier than what I am now after I, had her. And I ended up wearing maternity clothes for like 2.5 years after because I refused to buy those bigger clothes. Yeah, that was rough.
Looking back, I have a question for you because I know like this is different for everyone. Do you think that by not accepting your body and wanting to dress it, buy clothes that fit it then kept you stuck?
Oh yeah. Yeah, it was just like, it was a spiral of I'd get mad at myself and be like, okay, well, you can't eat. You've got to do something about this. You can't eat. And then I would wait too long and then I'd be starving and, ready to eat 4 pizzas. It was just. Yes, it was a constant battle. I was either eating too much or not eating enough. I didn't have that right balance.
I learned the hard way that I had to buy clothes that fit my body no matter what that size was at that time. Because if I didn't, I was either going to stay there or go back to my bigger clothes because how it's really hard to take care of yourself when you don't love the person and you can't even let it get dressed without it feeling uncomfortable, your body feeling comfortable in your clothes. Because when I was in there was a stage where I wouldn't call it rapid weight loss, but like weight had started falling off and I was getting frustrated that I would like wear clothes, like buy new clothes, and they would like only fit for maybe 6 weeks. And at one point I was like, I'm not buying clothes until I get to X. Right. Guess who never got to X because she didn't buy clothes that actually fit her body. So then subconsciously it's like you're self-sabotaging. Because it's like, there's something wrong with me exactly as I am. So either you overeat, you don't take care of yourself, you're trying to do these like stupid extreme things that always, for me, ended in a binge. When if I had just gone to even the thrift store to buy clothes that I could feel good in that moment, I could have skipped that whole debacle of misery.
Right. Because when I had started to break down one time and I went to the store and I had to wear, it was like between a 14 and a 16. And that devastated me because, I'd always been like a 6 or an 8. And I'm sitting there going, no, I got to get back down to where I was. No. And I would hang on to all these clothes from college when I was, a size 6, but I couldn't wear them. And they kept taking up all this space in my closet. My husband's like, why don't you get rid of these if you never wear them? I'm like, because I'm going to get back in them one day.
You know what's funny about that is that even when you can fit in those clothes, you probably weren't going to wear them anyway because they're not your current style.
That's so exactly what happened.
On to this memory of like, I will be worthy and it's going to be okay when I can button those pants. And then it's like, even if you can button those pants, you're like, this is so not my vibe right now. And you just throw them away and you're just like, what the hell just happened?
I know, that's exactly what happened. Nobody, close the door. He just got home from school. I'm sorry. He's 8. They had early dismissal.
You have 2 kids?
Yeah.
And so your oldest is 12 if you had her when you were
13, yeah.
Or 13?
Yep. So 13-year-old daughter and 8-year-old son. And so I got back to that point to where I could wear the clothes that I wore in college. And I was like, this is cool. I'm not going to wear these. What am I doing?
So you know what? I want to pause real quick because if you're listening right now and this is you and you have a pile of clothes in your closet or hidden in a drawer from 10 years ago that you're determined you're going to fit
20.
I want you to just go donate them right now, because even when you reach your goal and you can fit in those clothes, you're not going to wear them, because you're going to go buy new things that fit who you are right now. And I don't mean fit as in like a size, I mean fit as in your personality.
Right.
You've evolved and you are a different person than you were 10 years ago. The clothes are not the same.
I'm not a club rat in Myrtle Beach anymore. Those days are long gone.
Right. And some of our older styles, like I still wear things that remind me of clothes, especially as fashion comes back around, but I'm not wearing them the same way. And this color palettes are different, and like, so just
Yeah.
do yourself a favor, go make a donation and free yourself from the
Now, I
confusion.
have kept a couple of items just for my daughter because when I was a teenager, I was asking my mom, I was like, "Well, did you ever hang on to any of your old clothes? I want to see like some of your old clothes because we're built the same and everything." And she's like, "No, I got rid of them." I'm like, so I was sitting there going, "Okay, well, maybe I'll hang on to a few things
Few
for
of the
her." Of
classics.
course, she has a totally different style than me already. I mean, she loves pastel colors.
My
And
girl.
I like bright colors. I mean,
Also
pastels
my girl.
do not look good. Pastels do not look good on me at all.
I love that so much.
Between the
What
fair skin and the ginger hair, I mean, it's just pastels just
You had mentioned earlier that, you were a pastry chef and you learned that you had some digestive issues. Can we talk about like how you learned, like what was going on in your body that you're like something's not right, and like how did you find out that you had these disorders?
so I started experiencing severe pain in my upper abdomen, and I had no idea what it was. And now I think stress played a really big role because when I was working in the restaurant industry, I was working 10-hour days. I had an hour and a half commute, to and from work. So 45 minute, either way. Um, but I had my kids were 2 and 6. So I was working 10-hour days. I was in a very stressful work environment where I didn't smoke, so I didn't get breaks. The only time I sat down was when I had to pee. I would eat standing up. I mean, it was just like a very fast-paced, stressful environment. And I love those guys that I worked with, and I learned so much from them, and I would never trade that experience for anything, just because of so much that I learned. And so I started developing these just really bad stomach pains, and I was like, I have no idea what this is. So I went to the doctor, and they thought it was gallbladder.
Mm.
So, I was like, okay, well, I guess I'm going to have to get my gallbladder removed. I didn't know anything about it. But then when they went in, they're like, well, no, it's not the gallbladder. And they did an upper endoscopy, and they diagnosed me with gastritis, irritable bowel syndrome, and small intestinal bacteria overgrowth. Now, this was on top of psoriasis that I'd been dealing with for years. I had this spot on my knee that was like, teeny tiny, but over the years it grew. And I mean, it like consumed my entire kneecap. And the doctor had said, he just kind of, I was like, well, what do I do? Because the medicines they were giving me did nothing. I mean, they just absolutely did nothing for me. I was like, I can't keep living like this. What do I do? And he shrugged his shoulders and he said, try the low FODMAP diet, and handed me a pamphlet on celiac disease and sent me out the door. And I was like, well, what's celiac disease? What's FODMAPs? So that was when I started looking up gluten, and I was like, huh, okay, well, I'll cut this out and see what happens. Cut that out, went through little bit of withdrawal symptoms, but I cut gluten out, and within a week, my psoriasis had cleared up completely. That spot on my knee was gone. And my stomach just started to ease, and things started to relax, and I started to feel better. And I was like, well, the only thing I cut out was gluten. What would happen if I added it back in and see what happens? So we went to like a bakery, and I got some cakes and scones, and I was just like, all right, if we're gonna test it, we're gonna do it
We're
right.
gonna test it hard.
We're gonna go all out. So the next day I woke up, and that spot on my knee had come back with a vengeance, and my
Isn't it
stomach was killing me. And
fascinating how
yeah,
our bodies just throw red flags all over the place, and we're so numb to their warning signals?
right, right. And I was just like, huh, okay. So I cut it back out, and it was gone within 2 days. This time it cleared up faster when I cut it back out. So that spiraled me to start seeing how big of a difference what we eat affects our health, affects our bodies. And just so, oh my gosh, I don't know how many books I've read by this point. I mean, that was 6.5 years ago. I've read at least 50 or 60 books on just health and nutrition and just going down rabbit holes. I'm surprised I don't have rabbit ears from all the rabbit holes that I've gone down.
That's fantastic. I've never heard anyone say that before. I may become annoying and start saying that when I say
Well, people told me I'm annoying my whole life, and I'm like, well, it's just me
Me
now.
too.
Yeah.
Me too. And I embrace it. Like I am who I am and like this is me. And like I'm the neighbor who dances down the street when she's done running. And yesterday my mom and I went and saw the Wonka movie and at the end I'm like we are the only people in the theater. It was just the two of us. I'm like dancing and acting a fool. And she's like, Tiffany, we're in public. And I'm like, Mom, there's literally no one here. Like, I'm just having a good time. And she's just like, you're embarrassing me. I was like, to you. So I get you. I am just, life's too short not to have a good time and be yourself.
Oh yeah,
As long as you're not an asshole to someone, it's totally fair game. Like, don't be a jerk.
yeah, I do really well with people that are nice to me, but when they're not nice, I don't do so well.
Like, not my people.
I'm like, that.
But I'm with you though. Like you were sharing your gluten story, and it's like I know I work with my clients a lot on just they want a meal plan. Tell me what to eat, and it's like no, I'm gonna teach you how to know what's right for your body, and we're gonna really get curious about how your body responds when you eat the foods that you're already eating. Like we don't
Right.
need to change anything until we know what's working for you and what isn't. And you're gonna naturally, and I've found that when people start tuning in, they naturally start avoiding the foods
Right.
that they realize make them feel miserable or tired or bloated and grumpy. And it's not because it's a diet, it's because they have intentionally made that connection of every time I eat this, I feel this and I don't want to feel that way. And for you,
Exactly.
it was every look, when I eat gluten, my body breaks out in a freaking skin rash. Like this is not working for me. And I feel like that makes it's no longer a restriction. It's no longer you're cutting things out. It's like I don't want that. I don't want to feel the way what that food does to me. And I
Right.
think like that is the key to people finding their own version of sustainable health.
Right. And another thing that I had experienced, I've had ocular migraines since I was 12.
What's an ocular migraine? I'm
That's
assuming
when
eyeball.
you lose half your vision. Yeah, and it's happened when I've been driving down the road. So it's my diet has a lot to do with that as well. In
Let's
fact,
talk about this. I'm asking this because within the last like month or so, I've had more headaches than I've ever had. And yesterday, driving home, I was getting a headache and I felt like, have you ever passed out? You know how like the world closes in before you fall? Like
yeah,
that
yeah,
you're passed out. Like I was getting that like weird feeling of like my eyes weren't right. So now
right.
I'm like, ooh, tell me more about this ocular migraine stuff.
So, three types of food I have discovered that really do affect me. Well, four if you count alcohol. Um, it, gluten, sugar, and dairy. So, and when I say sugar, I say processed sugar. I'm talking about processed sugar. I still have like maple syrup and honey and, small amounts of stevia, but it's got to be small amounts. It can't be a lot. Um, anyway, dairy, the chronic sinus infections that I used to deal with in my 20s, when I cut dairy out of my diet, it was like everything cleared up. The headaches, like a lot of the times I would get like these sinus headaches, cleared up. I mean, it was insane how much of a difference that made. And the last time I had an ocular migraine was actually in April. And I think it was a combination, and it had been over 2 years since I had one at that point. But I think it had been a combination. I was going through a lot of emotional stress. With a friend of mine, I was dealing with some stuff earlier this year, and then I got sick. And then we went to a restaurant. There was a bunch of teenagers working. It was like a sandwich shop, And I was so excited because they have gluten-free bread. And I was like, all right, I'm going to get my sandwich with the gluten-free bread. And so I ordered, it's like, gluten-free bread. You have gluten-free bread, right? I must have said gluten-free bread like 5 times. And she's like, yeah. And so she puts my order in and they bring the food out. And they're like, gluten-free sandwich. And I'm looking at it going, that doesn't look like, because we ate there, like several times. I was sitting there going, that doesn't look like the gluten-free bread that they usually bring out. And my husband's looking at it. He goes, that looks like my bread that I usually get. It's like, yeah, I don't think this is. So I took a bite and I was like, no, this is definitely not gluten-free bread. It's too good to be true. It was like soft and delicious and, just heavenly. He said, well, what are you, he said, well, what are you going to do? And I was like, well, I haven't had it in a while. I have some digestive enzymes. I'll just take some of those and see how it goes. The next morning I woke up, half my vision went out about an hour after I got up. And I can always tell, I'll hold my hand in front of my face. And if half my hand is gone, I'm like, that's it. There it goes. There it goes. And
Still real. Still can't
yeah,
happen.
yeah. So, and I think it was just, like the combination of like the stress, and I was sick. So my sinuses were messed up from being sick. And, so I think the gluten was just the icing on top of the cake, literally. And it's just like, ah!
Mm.
So I've been really careful since then. And, so many people have just looked at me and said, oh, I wish I had your willpower. And I'm like, it's not willpower. It's literally a logical decision. Am I going to spend 5 minutes of pleasure eating this for 24 hours of pain? It's not worth it to me anymore.
Yep.
So
I am very similar when it comes to tomato. My body has a really hard time digesting tomato products, specifically like pasta sauces and pizza sauces. And every once in a while, and once I learned it, I didn't believe it was true. And then when I, like you, we did some science experiments, and it's like, huh, there's something really here. Who would think tomatoes? They are
right,
like a staple in most every recipe that you go and find on the internet. And every once in a while, there's like a pasta or a pizza. I'm like, that actually looks worth a bellyache. And I have not met a pasta or pizza that was worth the stomach ache, even though for the last 15 years, I keep thinking that one day one of these will be the one that was worth it. 15 years has never been worth it.
yeah, it's never
But
it's never been worth
you
it.
want so desperately to quote unquote be normal
Yeah,
that you convince yourself that it's going to be okay, because either you want to fit in, you don't want to have the special dietary needs, like you just want to be able to like get in and get out sometimes.
right.
And like, why can we not normalize the fact that people do have different, it's not even a dietary preference as in like I'm being a pain in the butt and annoying. It's like I literally shouldn't be eating this, so why do I keep trying to like accommodate so I don't feel like a weirdo?
Right. And that's so my husband, he's 3 years older than me. He's 46. And he's always been slender. He's never been a big eater. Opposites attract big time. But he never had any health issues, but he's eaten just terribly his whole life. Just, junk food
Those
and
people.
yeah, loves maple. And so he and I started running around the same time together, but he's run more than I have in the past, and he's just a natural endurance athlete. And so, he still was eating the way that he was eating and hasn't had any problems. And I was just sitting there thinking, is this going to catch up with you? Because he started training more and more and more. So the last half marathon that he did, which was last month, he did not fuel properly at all. And he ended up crashing about, I think it was 10 or 11 miles in. And he thought he had pulled a muscle, and it was in the same spot where I was having all of my stomach pain. So he kind of panicked. He's very proactive whenever it comes to going to the doctor. I'm like, oh. So he went to the doctor. They did, yeah, yeah. So he went and got an abdominal ultrasound, and they found polyps in his gallbladder and cysts on his liver. Now, both of these are not super alarming right now, but they could lead to problems later. And that scared him. So,
Mm.
he's been asking me, okay, tell me more about the Mediterranean style diet. And, I want to start eating healthier. And I'm like, oh, because I felt so alone and isolated for the past 6.5 years because I'm the only person other than my mom. My mom eats really healthy. But she caves more than I do, and literally every single time has stomach issues from it.
So
I'm
your
like,
family didn't adjust their eating styles to help accommodate you and make things easier for you at home? That's a shame.
well, I do all the cooking. My kids don't really have
Oh,
a
so it's your
choice.
fault. You thought you were, did you think you were burdening them?
No,
Okay, just checking. Because that's a real thing. That
no,
is a real thing. It's like the number one thing when I um coach women. It's like I don't want to have to cook three different meals for my kids and my husband and myself just to get healthy and lose weight. And it's like, wait a second, time out. Why is how you're eating to make yourself feel your best? Why do you not want that for your children? Well, I don't want them to miss out. And it's like, miss out on what you're going through right now.
right.
But we have this stigma of me, I'm trying to get healthy. I don't want to burden other people with my restrictions. And it's like, why don't you want to teach them healthy living and have a better
I'm
relationship
called
with
the
food
sugar
and your
Nazi.
body?
I'm called the sugar Nazi in my family. And, it's like with my kids, I'm just trying to teach them and be like, okay, this is how these foods affect your body.
Mm,
So I want to give them the freedom, within, like I said, they're 13 and 8. So it's still like logically, they're not going to make very logical decisions when it comes to food. But pancakes, my kids love pancakes. I make them oat flour pancakes. They are plant
love it.
based, they're gluten free, dairy free. I mean, it's like, and I'll sprinkle a little bit of Enjoy Life chocolate chips in them. And I mean, just a couple. And I get the maple syrup for them. They love these things. I keep the freezer stocked with them. And so it's like I try to make little changes like that. My daughter's gotten to the point where she doesn't like regular pancakes anymore. She likes mommy's pancakes. And I'm like, yes.
Good
So
job, Erin.
right. So, and like same with my husband, he loved these cinnamon roll muffins that I made, and they were terribly unhealthy. But he does like pumpkin, so I started experimenting with these pumpkin cinnamon roll muffins. Well, I didn't tell him, but every single batch got a little bit healthier, little bit, but now they're fully plant based, and
I love this.
his palate has adjusted completely to these muffins that I switched back one time, and he was like, "These are different. I don't like them." Where's the original version? I was just like, okay, okay.
I love that. And I think it's so important. Last week we talked to my friend Melise, and she was saying it's very similar. Like, I'm trying to help my kid. Like, I'm not always gonna be able to control what my kids eat. So I'm trying
Right.
to educate them on how their body feels and what different foods do for their body. And she's like, I had a complete mom win moment because I asked my kid, like, hey buddy, why didn't you eat that? And they said to her, well, that's because every time I eat that, my belly hurts and I didn't want my belly to hurt. And so I chose this. And I was just like, that I feel like is like the biggest mom win, like you were sharing too. It's just like educating them and letting them figure out what's working for them. I think is such a great tool that we can give our kids
Right.
so that they can
And
be aware and not just
yeah,
go through life numb.
and that's what I've
Do
noticed.
you
Like,
know?
so
Oh,
my
sorry.
my son, I think he has like a touch of ADD. He doesn't honestly, but and I was just reading recently that gluten is as inflammatory as it is very inflammatory for the brain. So if you have anxiety, depression, ADD, ADHD, it's linked to Alzheimer's, dementia, just all these neurological conditions. Gluten is very inflammatory for the brain. So, and I was reading that and I was like, huh.
Huh.
So I started cutting down on my son's gluten even more. And I started telling him, all right, buddy, we're going to cut back. We're not cutting out completely, but we're just going to cut down. And I saw a difference in his focus. I was like, huh, okay. Now I know that dairy affects him because we went to we went to get pick up some stuff from a store, and they were like, "Can we get milkshakes?" And I'm like, "Sure, we don't do that." Well, y'all can get them. I'm not getting them. But so I mean, he inhaled his, just sucked it down. Not even a few minutes later, projectile vomited in the car 3 times, and I was like, "Bud, okay." You can't take in that much because those dairy milkshakes were so good, but they're made with half and half and real ice cream. And I was like, your little belly cannot handle that much all at once. So ever since then, if he wanted a milkshake, I'm like, you can have like this much. Remember what happened that one time? Oh yeah, I don't want that to happen. So I'm trying to teach them, like how it affects them in different ways. When they start to get really congested and stuffed up, I'm like, all right, well, let's cut back on your dairy. And I did that with my daughter. She was on Singulair. It was like it was Singulair for allergies because she kept sniffing, just sniffing constantly. And so the doctor put her on that. And I was like, well, let's try something. So dairy affects my sinuses. Let's see how it does with you. Cut out dairy for a week. Her nose cleared up completely. And that was the only difference that we made. So whenever she gets congested and she's like, Mommy, I'm congested, I'll say, how much dairy have you had? Okay, well, let's think about this moving forward with what you're going to eat. If you want it to calm down, let's make that decision.
Yeah. I really, really like, I love this part of this conversation so much. And it's like one of my, like, I don't know if pet peeve is the right phrase, but it's like one of my things where it's like, I wish so badly that these were the moments that our doctors were trained on when we go to them to say, hey, something's not right. Like, instead of throwing us just on a med or do this or cut it back to 1200 calories or like whatever the mainstream put a stamp
Right.
on your way answer is, like, why do we not explore with people's foods more? And not from a, you all dairy and gluten is bad. It's like, no,
Yeah,
everything's
yeah.
unique. Like, this is what you're having. Let's play with these things and see how you feel in 2 weeks and go from there. Because so many of our ailments can be improved with small little nutritional changes.
Right.
Like, why is that not our like standard practice of medicine, and then allow Western medicine to like fill the gaps where we need the extra more advanced help? Like,
Right.
oh, like it
I
kills me
know.
every time. And you were just sharing, like, your story is so real. And so like, if you're listening right now, like, think about it. Like, are you feeling inflamed? Do you feel congested? Are your joints hurting? Like, let's explore what you're eating and make some changes here and there and start paying attention to if they make improvements,
Right.
because that might be the thing that takes you from cranky and miserable and biting everyone's head off to feeling like you're more in control of your day and in control of your own schedule, just by alleviating some of the like icky feelings in your body. Like, it's so important.
Right. And I was just, I think a lot of people don't realize it with any sort of condition that ends with itis, that's inflammation. And my brother and I were talking because he's dealt with plantar fasciitis,
Mm.
where I'm sure as a runner.
Been
And
there,
I
done
was telling him,
that.
I was like, yeah. I was like, well, that's inflammation, right? He's like, how do you know? And I was like, itis means inflammation. So, plantar fasciitis, that's inflammation.
Do you
What?
see my wheels spinning? I'm like, I'm listening.
But what's
No.
fascinating to me is that like there are so many things that could be contributing to inflammation, no matter what it is, whether it's overuse or what you're eating, or I don't know. When it comes to intermittent fasting, I started playing around with that in 2020. And when I first started doing it, I would fast daily for like 16 to 18 hours. And that worked well for me for a while. It actually decreased a lot of my inflammation, but it when I started running, I couldn't do that anymore. It was like my body needed more, especially with the weight training that I was doing and the running, and I do yoga. I mean, it's like I do all the things. And now I've gotten to the point where I just listen to my body. And I cut it's like I'll eat dinner, I'll eat, enough, and then I'm good. And then I go to bed and I don't eat again until the next morning. So, like I'm naturally fasting
Be
12 to 13
naturally
hours.
fast.
Right, right. But like last night, it was 8:30 and I was hungry. Not just, oh, I'm thinking about food. I was hungry. Like my body's sitting there going, you better feed me now or I'm going to knock somebody down. So I was like, all right. So I just got like a handful of raw cashews because, you know, they've got fat and protein, fiber and everything. And I was like, all right, I know that a handful of nuts will fill me up enough to where I can go to bed and I'll be satisfied. And I was great. Woke up this
Take the
morning
edge
and
off, easy for my body to digest while I'm sleeping, and like
yep.
go about my business. Yes.
And it's rare that I get hungry in the evenings after dinner because normally I eat enough, but apparently yesterday for dinner I didn't eat enough. My body's like, feed me,
Yeah.
feed
Most
me
of
now.
us, our evening eating habits are just that. It's a habit and it's part of
Right.
the routine. It's not that you're actually hungry. It's just like when I sit down on the couch, my body thinks I've trained it that we should be munching on something and I'm bored. So now I'm munching. Whereas if you're eating enough for dinner and you're being conscious about it, you're just like, oh, I'm not actually hungry. I'm bored. Or
Right.
like, it's part of my routine. I just need to like break this. And then knowing when it's like real hunger and being like, okay, yes, we do need to go have a snack before we go to bed.
Yeah.
But most of us naturally fast if we were to just stop snacking
Right.
mindlessly
Right.
before we go to bed.
And you know, it's like with the fasting, I've talked to people that can fast for long periods of time, and I'm like, that's not my that doesn't work for me. Like I have two brothers, and then my other brother, he will do extended fast. Like he's done, I think he's done like a 40-hour fast or whatever, and he was trying to go beyond that. Well, he's bigger than me, and he's a man, and he's not training at all. Like he sits at a desk all day long, and but that works well for him, and he feels better when he does it. So it's like even though we're siblings, we have completely different bodies, completely different lifestyles. So what we do is going to be totally different than each other.
Back to that bio individuality.
Right.
For me, if I were to try to fast, even if all of the world's best doctors would say that it would be better for my brain and my inflammation or whatever the thing is, for me personally in my programming, me fasting leads to my binge eating
Right.
flaring up and me losing absolute control. And so
Right.
like that doesn't work for me.
Right.
But me, most mornings now, because I don't, when I'm training really hard or very specifically, like I wake up hungry, my body's doing a lot of work. It's like ready for breakfast within an hour, but I'm not right now. And so like, I'm really not ready for breakfast or to eat until around 10:30. And that's what works for me now. And so
Right.
it's learning to just listen and stop forcing yourself to follow someone else's plan and learn what works for you.
Right. And like with my workouts, I've had to play a little bit here and there as far as like when I get up in the morning, am I going to go ahead and eat or am I going to do a workout? But it really depends on what I'm doing, what time of the day it is. I mean, there's so many factors and every day
Yes.
can be different. So I just
Season
listen
of
to my
life.
body.
Yes, and every day can be different.
Yes.
Oh my God. Such an underrated statement. But just because every day can be different doesn't mean that every day you can't take care of yourself and be intentional about it.
Right. I
Like
mean, there are some days I will eat like a horse, and then there's other days where I'm like, I'm just not as hungry today.
your cycle, I mean,
Oh,
at
yeah,
28 days, your hormones all over, it impacts what you actually need to eat, the type of cravings you have, and things like that. Like, depends on the weather, your mood, like what your schedule looks like. There's times where, like, I need to meal prep on Sunday and have everything already packed in containers ready to grab, like luncheons out of the fridge for myself for breakfast,
right,
lunch, and dinner. And then there's other times where, like, that completely turns me off and gives me like makes me so hungry that like I could eat a whole like 10 cows and my body would be like, where's the next bite?
right,
And I need to be a little bit more flexible of like, okay, we've got chicken and we've got vegetables and I have all the things that could make a meal, but I need to be able to like pull it together on the day. But that comes with learning to listen.
yeah.
Oh, listening.
That's
I feel like that's the key of our conversation today. Listen to your body and play with it to see what works.
yeah, exactly. Because I mean, I had actually gotten down to I maintained my weight. I'm 5'7", and I'd gotten down to like 128 pounds, and I maintained that for 3 years, and I was running and everything, but I didn't feel like I was getting enough, and I started weight training and adding a little more protein, and I gained 5 pounds. But you know what? I'm stronger and I'm faster. I got my fastest time for a 5K last month that I'd ever gotten. And I'm sitting there going, I'm strong and I feel good. I don't care what that scale says. I don't, if I have to gain another 10, 15 pounds and I'm putting on solid muscle and I'm a beast for these triathlons that I want to do and I can finish them, and that's all that matters to me. Is
That's
it?
I notice, and I don't know about you, but for me personally, I notice the only time I'm even curious about what my weight is when I'm not taking care of myself the way I want to be, and I'm ignoring my body's signals. Because then it's like, I wonder if we've gained any weight. But it's only when I'm not doing the things that I know are best for me. When I
Right.
am, and I'm in my routine and I'm listening and like doing the things, I do not give two shits.
Yeah.
Like, I couldn't even tell you if there was a scale in the house. It's only when I am shortchanging myself and ignoring
Right, right.
my shit. When I'm ignoring my
Yeah.
shit. Oh, I love this so much. Erin, this has been such a great conversation. How do people connect with you?
Well, I do have a YouTube channel. It's Chef Erin's Kitchen, and my author page is on Amazon. Just people can do a search for Erin K. Courtney. I have it's either 19 or 20 books on there now.
So fun.
My brain doesn't shut off. That's the problem. Um, I'm on Instagram under Chef Erin Courtney, and then I have a Facebook page, Chef Erin's Kitchen.
Awesome. And I know you were mentioning before we hit play or record, you have a recipe book with 500 recipes. That's in the
Yes,
Amazon store,
gluten
right?
free. Yep.
Oh, I'm gonna link
So,
that in the show notes.
well, and the funny thing is, I had written 4 cookbooks before that one that were all traditional. Because, when I worked as a pastry chef, I specialized in cheesecake. I mean, that was New York style cheesecake. That was my specialty. And so I had written all these cookbooks with like freezer meals and easy dinners and party foods and cheesecake. And I'm just sitting there going, well, I really don't eat these anymore. And people kept asking me, well, when are you going to do a gluten-free book? And I was like, all right, fine. So I compiled it all together. It's got over 500 recipes, and I just published it back in July. So that's
And they're
been,
all foods that you eat. So that
yes,
means that's like they're enjoyable. I love that so
yeah.
much. So as we wrap up, is there anything that is left on your heart that either you wanted to share today that we didn't talk about, or just a message you want to leave the listener with?
I really just want to tell people that start making small changes now. You don't have to do everything overnight. It doesn't have to be like a light switch. Just start making small changes now and find what works best for you. Don't comparison is the thief of joy. That's what my husband tells me. So just find what works best for you.
Oh, so good. Thank you so much for sharing with us today. With that, everyone, I will see you next week. That's Two Humans Talking. Bye.
Bye.